Make sure I don't have any last minute messages. I did confirm the sheriff was going to join us, so hopefully he'll be here. Oh, there he is. Speak the devil.
I'm here. I just I got to turn my audio or my video on here now. Not sure how that happened.
Okay, you're now live.
Yeah, on the lower left of your toolbar. There you go.
All right, I think the only one we're missing is Chris Corpola, and she should be joining us.
You want to wait a couple minutes? Okay. I'll take one more bite.
My apologies. I went to the Google Meets link first, and I'm like, why is nobody else here? So
right, sometimes, yeah, it's a matter of trial and error.
I've found when setting it up, it's usually advisable to put the title as Zoom meeting, because Google will automatically create an option when you put it on the calendar. But if you title it Zoom meeting, presumably people, if they read the title, will understand to go to the Zoom link.
Yeah. Also, when you're scheduling that, once you add people into the participants list, it'll show an X next to that Google Meets option. You just X out of it, and then it won't show it.
Right.
It'll only show the Zoom option.
Okay, that's good to know.
it's getting to be like a crescent wrench, though. It's not an adjustable wrench, it's a crescent wrench. So if it's a Zoom meeting, is it through Google Meets or is it actually through Zoom?
There's Mr. Corporal, I believe, coming on.
All right, looks like we're all here.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chris. All right, well, we'll call the June 24, 2020 meeting of the CJCC Executive Committee to order. And let's see, for roll call, it's pretty easy. Sarah, you just, guys go across and it's like you can see who's here. So we need to do anything else with that?
No, I've got roll call, but if we wanted for just the benefit of the public or being that we're live to do a roll call, it's up to you.
Sure. Well, why don't we do that? I'll just say that we have our chairman of the county board, Dave Bartlett, Katie Shalley, clerk of court, Sarah Benedict, our CJCC coordinator, Jim Tripp, a member of our county board, and also now the chair of our Judiciary and Law Committee, and Shelley Jo Metzger, our citizen, one of our citizen members of the CJCC, Paul Miller, our county manager, Andrea Nodoff, our district attorney, our sheriff, Kevin Bigg, branch 2 Judge Smeltzer, and the director of the Department of Human Services and co-chair of the CJCC, Kristen Corpola, and then yours truly, Judge Peterson, branch 1. And we have Krista Vinn with County IT assisting with, I guess, our live streaming efforts today. So I guess the first item up, we last time we met as executive committee was in January 29, 2020, before the COVID-19 hit the fan, so to speak. And so does anybody wish to make a motion to approve our minutes from the January 29 meeting?
So move.
Okay, any second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed, the same sign? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Okay, staff report, Sarah, go ahead.
All right. First thing, just want to give a budget update that we did put in for the CJCC division to 2021 budget estimate. We did hold to that 0% increase. At this point this year, our expenditures are down. And we're trying to maximize the use of our grant funding that we have right now. So hopefully at the end of the year, we'll be able to return some back to the county. So we're just kind of getting that underway, that whole budget process. Update on the sequential intercept mapping. So that was the award that we received for technical assistance to help us map our criminal justice system and our behavioral health systems and how they interact and overlap. That was going to be an in-person day-and-a-half workshop with up to 50 participants. The technical advisors, their policy research associates got the go-ahead to do virtual versions of this. So we do have a planning call set up, I think tomorrow, to talk about this new kind of plan that they have in place, and that was approved by SAMHSA, the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. So it's going to look quite different. So instead of having like a day and a half that we all really had to find time to carve out, because it's important that we have key leadership there. It's going to be in smaller sessions, virtual sessions. So as we learn more about the process, we'll update the group, and especially the folks that it's important for to be there. So I've already began scheduling with the judges to get some dates to get things going, but we're already running into some challenges with the backlog of cases and the challenge of getting both judges in the same place at the same time. So I think it will be challenging to have all the key stakeholders at all these different sessions, but we'll work to make sure that we're at least getting good representation and that input gets worked into our end product with that mapping.
But just a question for you, Sarah, on that. When you look forward, this seems like an important effort that is being undertaken. Is there any thought to, for a couple sessions, at least for us as judges and maybe some of the other participants as well, to pull one of those, 5 to 9 type evening meetings, just that we can get everybody together that's not competing with the workday? Just a suggestion.
Good suggestion, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. And right, we can certainly offer that as a suggestion to our technical advisors. I know you're up for it. You're a hard worker and willing to work anytime. So we'll see what we're able to schedule.
No, I get that, but what you alluded to earlier with the schedules, we're scheduling out in September and October. It won't be another month, and we're probably going to be scheduled almost to the end of the year. And same goes for the district attorney's office. So.
Right. Let's see, a program update, just to let folks know that programs are continuing to run with our TOP program, the treatment court program. Reentry has been fully virtual, but that's getting set to kind of get reinitiated July 1st. Sounds like the jail is going to be opening up to allow the peers back in. So we got some orientation scheduled in the jail. Some of the jail classes are starting to resume. So that program probably had the biggest impact in that we really just weren't able to get into the jail. We had the peers doing some support remotely, but the hands-on, the planning piece, the coursework, that part was on hold. So. And then finally, state and national updates. So I just got off of the state CJCC TAD subcommittee work group. So we had a chance to kind of exchange how the different programs, both treatment courts and diversion programs, are operating. It's all across the board. Some are as normal, others are completely shut down. It's really kind of based county by county. So that's interesting. They have also produced a report that really looks at the recidivism of treatment court and the diversion programs and a cost benefit analysis. So that was something that they were required to do for the state legislature. So they have finalized that report. So they just gave us the executive summary today, which I didn't get to fully absorb, but I look forward to reading that report and sharing it, because those are some of the same things that we're working on in our data work group, looking at recidivism measures and really that cost benefit of the program. But overall, the state report, which we contributed data to, is really positive as far as the outcomes and the cost savings to the state. And then in addition, just the outcomes of that person, but also the whole system. And by diverting those cases and reducing the recidivism of them in the future, it really does provide relief to the system overall. Also on the state front, you may be aware that there are some proposed legislation for law enforcement that the governor came out with, really looking at police accountability and to reduce racial disparities. A lot of it really was focused on more of the policing aspect versus the racial disparities. But the TAD report did also identify, and this was, this was kind of pre-COVID, current events, but identified racial disparities and inequities as a #1 priority for the TAD program, the grant program, because in different places there really are different there's just less likelihood that minorities participate in programs, that they get referred to programs, that they graduate with programs. And that's across the board in smaller counties, larger counties, no matter what the makeup of the demographics. So that's just something that the state recognizes and has identified as a priority there as well. Then I would just add that I did renew the application for the WCA to continue to participate in the Public Safety Committee. And then also continuing with NACO. NACO has started some justice exchanges, and it's really focused on that data-driven justice piece, so really looking at the data and the policy. But they started 3 learning communities, so they just got those started this month. I participated in 2 of them already, but it's just really, again, a platform where folks have the opportunity to really exchange ideas, talk about some of the best practices, talk about some of the challenges that are going on, and really kind of share that knowledge. So it's nice that NACO is providing those platforms for us to continue to do that. That's my staff report, unless there's questions.
Okay, any questions for Sarah? I'll just throw one out there. It's just that, how have those programs like TOP program and our treatment court, you think, been affected by doing things virtually? We've still had the drug testing, right?
Yes, the drug testing is still going on in the community with our vendor, and they're being able to provide that in a safe way. For some, there are some alternative testing technologies that are being utilized, like sweat patches or oral swabs. So really just trying to have a variety of resources to check that accountability piece. So that's still in place and an important component. What has been lacking, staff have been doing a lot of their visits and case management appointments virtually, which has worked. Some people find that very effective. Other people, it's a little bit more challenging. We find that sometimes if there's more significant cognitive issues going on, or mental health issues, or even addiction issues going on at the time, so it's harder to make that connection when we're using the remote technology. But overall, I think it's been very positive. I think it's been the court sessions have been very positive as well. I think there's been a lot more participant interactions going on in the court sessions than what we had in the in-person sessions, which I think is just more people are able to focus more on what other people are saying versus the distractions of the environment. But another challenge, I think, is just there's a big sense that, well, it's not a sense, it's a fact that what's going on in the community is drastically shut down or reduced or limited from what it was pre-COVID. So for our folks that are having mental health or addiction issues, there's limited resources as far as where they can go. We've heard that the AA groups are starting back up in person, but those are just starting back up, and there's just a few where, you know, for a while everything was shut down. So that's part of it. Then there's the technology piece. Some folks have that broadband access and the technology that they can do remote meetings, others can't. So for those that can, it really has been helpful. For those that can't, there's probably more isolation going on. We've certainly seen more like a higher relapse rate, I would say, right now with the COVID going on. And then there's reduced services out there. So it's harder to get into treatment. It's harder to get that mental health appointment. So we are seeing the impacts of that with some participants struggling. And then if they've got employment complications on top of that, or they have children that they need to care for, all those things can be stressful and impact their ability to kind of focus on the recovery.
Is there any reason why the in-person meetings, you know, one counselor, one client can't be happening in person?
No, it can. It absolutely can. Yeah, but a lot of those aren't necessarily provided by our staff. They're provided by outside community providers. So some of them are resuming that in person, but it's still limited, or there's that backlog of cases that kind of, there's a wait list for groups because groups are going to be in smaller sizes. So I think just the amount of services were restricted. Now that things are opening back up, there's more, but there's still a higher demand for services than what's available.
I guess I was thinking of our staff and this building, the CSB, because we have had for some time, as you know, the ability to do meetings, in-person meetings by appointment. So at least those parts shouldn't be causing us problems, you know, pulling off those in-person meetings, in particular for any of our clients, for lack of a better word, that, you know, need that don't have the broadband and need that one-on-one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the state's DHS's guidance was to push people out to telehealth as much as possible. They've certainly let out, the counties have a lot of latitude now in terms of, you know, as they move back. We do some combination of both. In person and telehealth, but yeah, one of the things that would be would move people close more quickly back into in person would be if they lack the technological access.
Some of the drug officers have told me that the methamphetamine supply has gone down as a result of COVID and the borders being shut, that the cost has tripled or quadrupled in cost. So that's something, I don't know if the treatment court participants are disagreeing with that, but I mean, it's still out there, but what law enforcement has told me is it's harder to get. So maybe one upside of COVID.
That's a ray of hope. You know, one of the things that I think is really missing is that, and Shelley, you know, pipe in on this one, but is the fact that we don't have as many group recovery meetings in person. And that's one of the things that for people that are struggling, that's a very difficult thing, because, you know, I've come to believe that those meetings are critical for many people in recovery for that connection and support and motivation. But hopefully we'll see more of that, opening up more meetings.
I know Eau Claire is pretty much open for NA meetings. I know those are, they're still doing online or virtual Zoom meetings, but I know AA and NA both are still Zooming, but they are in person also now.
Mm-hmm.
As far as one-on-one counseling meetings, I know Arbor Place is, you know, going back to more one-on-ones in person, but we're following pretty strict guidelines with masks and 6 feet apart. And as far as our group at Arbor Place, those are really hard to do because it's a very limited room to have 6 feet apart. So
Yeah, so hopefully things keep heading in the right direction around here. So, all right, anything else on staff report? In fact, I think that question I had probably would fit well with our next item on the agenda. And when Sarah and Chris and I talked, that was something I guess I asked for. I think we all agreed we'd like to get some idea, particularly is interested in the sheriff's department and jail operations, where things are at, and what your agency as we put it on your current and planned operation status under COVID-19, and we can share about the courts. But I guess if Sheriff, you don't mind leading off, can you kind of give us an update in terms of what you are doing that's or what you're going to be changing in the near future, so forth. Update on how COVID-19 is affecting your operation.
Sure. As most of you are probably aware, we kind of relaxed, less aggressive in the enforcement area on the road, trying to avoid taking more people into the jail. In the jail, we furloughed our Huber inmates. We actually gave them the option. If they had 3 days left and they wanted to sit it out, we gave them that option to furlough. Everybody, I think one inmate had just a couple days left and sat his time out. Otherwise, we furloughed about 20 Huber inmates, released them to open up our Huber dorms for isolation for incoming inmates that did get arrested. From my perspective, meth hasn't slowed down the use. I think they're just paying more for it locally. And we're starting to see an uptick in property crimes because of that. Our burglaries are going up, our thefts are going up, and we're seeing an effect of that. The price of meth going up is what I think is happening. Our jail has, by reducing our jail population, we were able to keep no more than 10 inmates in a section of our jail at a time. And any incoming, like I talked about, isolating in the Huber sections to avoid putting them in general population after coming in off the street, running around doing meth and partying for a few days and then coming in and putting them into general population right away is just a catastrophe waiting to happen. So they were isolated in the Huber dorms. If they stayed more than 14 days and appeared to have a clean bill of health, then they're able to be moved into a general population. We're getting back to normal kind of now with health precautions, starting to allow volunteers back into the facility with screening, taking temps, the health questions, things like that. Our volunteers for our gardens are coming back, things like that. So slowly opening back up our front office, our front window. The jail's obviously got to be open 24/7, so that hasn't changed necessarily. But our front window of the sheriff's office has been closed since mid-March. And now July 1st, we're going to reopen that back up to foot traffic. And my window looks right out at the front door. So I see people coming and going and standing out there calling, trying to figure out how to get in and how to get services. So I think people will be happy to be able to walk in and have access to answer questions and report crimes and things like that they're used to being able to do. So our state inmates we're still sitting at 14 just before COVID shut us down. We had one out of 15 state inmates that went to Milwaukee for a court hearing and kind of got stuck down there. So we still have the same 14 out of 15 state inmates that we originally got under our contract. So that's a significant revenue for the county. In addition to that, everybody that's been sentenced to go to prison, and we've been holding, and it's up to 8 or 9 now that we're holding for the state, because they're not taking any new inmates in. They're actually paying us the same daily rate to hold those inmates as the state inmate contract. So $51.45 a day per bed. But we're actually sending our first 4 to Dodge intake the end of this week, early next week, to get rid of some of the problem children that we have here that cause most of the headaches for my jail staff. Other than that, anything specific I can answer for anybody, just let me know.
Is the state prison taking people now?
Yep, they just limited. They'll, Brown County, for example, talking to the sheriff over there, they've been sitting on 25 inmates that were supposed to go to prison right about the time they got shut down. So they're taking limited people. We've got 8, 9 sitting here now, and they're taking 4 this week or early next week. So, which, as long as they're not a problem for the jail staff and they create headaches for them, it's not a big deal. We're getting paid to keep them. But I think 4 of them are going soon here.
And are those people that have been sentenced from Dunn County that are going?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Either revocations or sentence. Mr. Seahaver is going as soon as possible.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Sheriff Big?
How's Huber running with the Huber dorm being kind of repurposed?
We just opened up, we took a limited number of Hubers back. I think 8 came back. So we're kind of trying to limit the numbers coming back. Obviously, we owe it to these people to try and get their sentence completed when they want to, move on with their lives. So June 1st, we opened up to take 8 Huber inmates back so we can get the process rolling on completing their sentences. A few of them have been put on electronic monitoring to complete that. Some of the ones that we can trust to do that, and but that comes at a cost to them as well. So, and cost to them and the county. But I think only 2 or 3 did the electronic monitoring option. But we've got a few more to get back in. We'll try and get through these first 8, see if things relax a little bit, and see if what COVID does around regionally before we let them all back in.
Any other questions? I might have a few more, but
yeah,
I'll just go ahead. So if we in treatment court, is the jail, if you want to use the jail for a sanction, is the jail available for that? I mean, so we can get, like immediacy and
Yep.
Would they be able to have Huber if they were sanctioned and to the jail for say 3-4 days, or 5? And, with Huber?
Yeah, we're just trying to limit the, to no more than 10 in a Huber dorm. I think most of them will take up to 14 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to keep the numbers low for exposure and contacts. But yeah, it's certainly available.
But if somebody was booked in, would they be put in the isolation and not be allowed to go on Huber if it's less than 14 days?
Good question. No, if they're sentenced to Huber, I'd have to work with Doug on that and go through the health screening process and kind of depends on what they've been up to lately. If they've been out partying and doing meth, it's really tough for us not to keep an eye on them for a while to make sure they're healthy enough to go in the general population.
Is there anything about our operations that has affected the sheriff's operations or the jail operations?
Not really. It's we have to operate 24/7, 365, whether there's COVID or not. And so it's had more of an impact on probably your end from us having to call you for bonds and call you for warrants. We try not to overlook warrants anytime there's a warrant for somebody, but it's kind of my practice or recommended practice to patrol deputies has been, don't go out looking for them. If you come across somebody on a traffic stop and you stop them for OWI and they happen to have a warrant, we have to deal with the warrant, obviously. But don't go pounding on doors looking for people to bring them to jail just because there's a warrant for them. So, and then, you know, calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, maybe some deputies enjoy that, but I'm sure you don't. But you know, trying to set new court dates and stuff in between Katie and the jail and the patrol deputies, there was, you know, a loss of communication there. Was there a new court date set? When was that court date? You know, so that's been kind of trying.
Yeah, I think we've had more phone calls over quashing warrants and giving new court dates than search warrants and that sort of thing. But
yeah,
I think Judge Smeltzer's had more calls than I have on that.
I have. Stop it. Okay. Now, Sheriff, here's the question I've got. Is that, as I hear what I'm hearing you say, that's probably going to work itself out here in the next few weeks, couple of months, that'll probably get closer back to normal?
Right. We're starting to get back to normal of you know, taking people to jail traditionally. If there's a warrant, body only warrant, they sit and appear in front of one of you the next day.
Now, is probation or corrections, I should say, I guess more accurately, are placing holds on people, and are they staying, or what's been going on with DOC?
They have been. They've relaxed a lot of it. For major violations, they're still placing holds on them, but otherwise, not as many as they used to. I'd say it's probably reduced at least 50%.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions for the sheriff? And this might be a good time to talk about what we're doing with the courts. And I think the person who's put an awful lot of work into this is Katie. And Katie, would you mind updating the committee on kind of the status of our plan and what we're going to be doing as far as in-person appearances and so forth?
Yeah, so we have our plan established. So we are trying to use as much video conferencing, telephonic hearings as possible before we do in-person hearings. If somebody requests that they want to appear in court, the judge is taking that under or reviewing it and making a decision if they want them to come in person. So it's been really minor, minimal amount of people coming in compared to normal. We're set up to go for jury trials during the month of July. We will set up quite a few procedures for when we bring jurors in if that takes place. Do you want to know the whole jury plan or?
No, but maybe if people are aware that there is a plan and if they're interested, we can get them a copy of it. And and that's something I suppose we have to, Judge Smeltzer and I haven't had a chance to talk about that. He's busy with intake this week and I was on vacation last week, but we want to try and make sure we push that out to the attorneys and set up a meeting with attorneys. I don't think we've done that yet, but we're
on the website. It's on our Dunn County website. It's on the WI Courts website, and we've pushed it out to our local attorneys and the St. Croix Valley Bar Association. So they've all had a chance to read it if they wish to do so.
Okay.
The only comment that I would make about that, Judge Peterson and Ms. Shalley, is that we did the plans both for jury and our normal proceedings. That was worked on in May. You got to remember, this is the end of June. A month has lapsed, and this whole thing dealing with COVID is a new thing. And so now, even though we got a plan in place, we're having a meeting here as we go forward. What's that?
You were cutting out, at least for me. I don't know if it's for anybody else, but you were cutting out.
Forget it. We'll catch you later. If
the internet in your chambers, there must be something going on over there. So,
well, whatever it is this better if I talk this way? Is this working better?
Well, I mean, it is working good. Yeah. So-
Okay, all I was saying that this plan that we put in, that's an end of May plan. We're now at the end of June. So that means we got to update where we're going from here. And so things will be changing, and it depends on, you know, as we put our heads together, what that looks like. But it's been a struggle doing things with this, the plan that was dictated by whether it was our district or the state courts of how we function. And I think we're going to take a hard look at how do we move forward so we can, you know, make it more effective to the best of our ability. That's what I see. So we'll see what happens. But, and Katie's aware of that. We've had those discussions. She's, I think she understands that as well. And Ms. Nodoff does also.
Yeah, and so just so everybody's aware, I mean, one of the requirements is that everybody in the court space has to be masked. That's one significant thing. So you'll see that in your live feed and so forth. We're going to continue with the Zoom and the live feed. We've had technical difficulties, just about every technical difficulty you could imagine, and then some. And then I think there's probably some more we're going to have eventually here. We've lost our connectivity to YouTube a time or two. You know, and again, the challenge is for our staff in the back with these remote appearances, and people are calling in, and we're looking at ways to try and reduce the load on them, because those are the things you don't really expect or anticipate. And then all of a sudden they're like switchboard operators handling multiple calls from multiple hearings. And it just has become, I think we had one day when I was last on intake, my first Tuesday of intake, and somehow there was a fiber optic cable that was cut somewhere, and we lost our county Wi-Fi, and then we lost a couple of phones. It was a chaotic day and took a lot of patience. But I know that you know, for us, it's changed a lot of things. It's hard for our court reporters to understand people when they're wearing masks, and then we also have sort of a lack of good attenuation and amplification or modulation. If we sometimes on our phone bridge, some people blow our eardrums out, and other people you can hardly hear them. You know, so it's just been something else, and the noise in the background in case. So it's really been a challenge. But the numbers, you know, we're not doing too bad, but we are going to have a lot of makeup work to do, and then we still have a lot of things to work out. Otherwise, there's some built-in delay in our system, but we won't get into the weeds on that. But there are a lot of things that Katie and the judicial assistants have been working hard on to try and improve that. And Katie, aren't you going to be having a meeting with the other clerks about Zoom and some other things?
I just did before this meeting today, so I'll share that with you both on Friday morning when we meet. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so the question is now, I mean, there's some technical stuff like, do we? I'm just going to get too much in the weeds, so we'll deal with that. But there are challenges, and we are working through them. But we are doing in-person appearances, and we're good to go for jury trials. So that's kind of the court update. Anything else you'd like to add, Katie or Judge Smeltzer?
Nope, I'm good.
Judge Smeltzer really likes wearing that mask almost as much as I do. So
I've got a question. So I guess, so the county policy is going to be changing July 1st as far as coming into the judicial center. So that's when the screening process is going to cease?
Yes, people are still going to be required to wear masks. They're required to wear them in the courtroom per the Supreme Court order as well. We have installed plexiglass around the witness boxes in all 3 courtrooms and have an abundance of sanitation or cleaning supplies. We should be good to go for when there is in-person court.
Okay, great.
That's a good.
Then I would just add from the state CJCC meeting, technology was a big piece of that discussion, just saying that the state really does not have good technology for a lot of what is being asked of right now, and that the broadband has been really a major complaint. So I think some of those issues that we're having, it's happening in other places across the state.
Yeah,
the only thing I'm just going to, if I could, Judge, just to react to what Sarah said, and I think she makes a point. The county can open the doors, but what we've learned so far, there's a lot of things that we can do, whether we're open, people are coming through the doors, that we can do the heavy lifting that makes it safe even when they're coming through those doors. And there's some things we might have to look at, because I don't have a problem wearing a mask if it's going to make everything safer, and having everybody in the courtroom wear a mask. Hey, that's fine. That's what we should be doing. Those are things that doesn't inhibit what we have to do. We can make those adjustments in the witness chair when they got to take their mask off to testify, but we need to, like the sanitizing, mask, distancing, all those things, we just got to change how we operate when you walk in. It isn't like we open up the courthouse doors and all of a sudden it's like it was in January. No, we got to manage it in a way where the people and the public that's coming in and our staffs feel that we're operating in a way that's reasonable, it's safe, and we can get work done. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. All right, any questions for any of the court folks? Okay, and Andrea, how about the DA's office? What's the word of your agency?
We're just continuing on as normal, but I would have to agree with the officer. It's been a little bit frustrating the last couple of months that cases just aren't moving forward. It's, whether defendants haven't made contact with the public defender's office or they want to meet with their attorney. So, we're starting to see a lot of cases get set for trial. I anticipate we're going to have a very busy fall and winter. I've increased more staff coming into the office. Some are still working remotely, but we are gradually increasing the number of people coming in.
What about the numbers, case referrals? What have you seen there?
Yeah, we're, as of late, we've been picking up, but we were slow for a couple of months for sure. But a lot more summons and complaints that are being filed. And then as we experienced yesterday, then individuals don't come in. So then we have to get them personally served. And that costs, $85 every time we do that. So, it's just a little bit, it's a frustrating process, but we're working with it.
Okay, any questions for the district attorney? Okay, and Chris, how about human services?
So I think that for the most part, we have been able to do all of our operations, move them to remote pretty easily. All of our mental health services are provided by telehealth. Just like all other things, no one size fits all. So some people have been able to really make good use of that, and then other people have struggled, both staff and consumers. But for the most part, services have continued to be delivered. We were not doing mental health. We were doing mental health in the jail virtually, and now they have returned physically as of the last week or two. We too, like the Child Protective Services reports, just like fell off the face of the earth for the first month or so, but they're all back. I would say we're pretty much, in terms of referral numbers, we're probably in most areas of practice, we're pretty much back to what we were pre-COVID. And about 90-ish% of the staff still work remotely. They're in and out to get things, mail, process mail, those kinds of things. Most of them don't have a print capability at home, so they have to either have staff that are on site send things out for them, or they have to come in and get their printed copies of whatever they need. But for the most part, it's all gone pretty well.
And what about the mental health in the jail? Is that still going okay?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Has that been in person or has that been remote?
It was remote for a while and now it's back to in person.
Okay. And what have you seen as far as mental health given under the circumstances with the COVID-19? Have we seen an increase in cases or?
Actually, no. So from a crisis standpoint, which is probably our best indicator in terms of number of people that make contact with the crisis system, either via the 24/7 call services or accessing mobile crisis through law enforcement, or emergency detention numbers. Those numbers have been either slightly decreased or certainly not increases. But I would say the people that touch the system, there's a much greater acuity of how sick people are, how much mental health illness that they're experiencing when they come into contact with the system. So I don't know how you necessarily quantify that, but I just think the kind of the inundated stress that people are under from all of the things that are going on, for people that are experiencing some reduced ability to to manage all of that, it looks worse for them than maybe it did 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay, any questions for Chris? All right, then, and Paul, is there anything as far as the county operations? I think we've all read the COVID-19 updates, maybe not every day, but most days. Anything else from the county's operations as far as, I think you're muted.
Yes, and my fumble finger too. I'm sure that if you read the COVID-19, and this group doubtless reads it verbatim every time I send it out, you're up to date with what the county is doing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And how does the budget look? I mean, that's one of my natural worries. Yeah, I mean,
the county budget.
I worry about the CJCC and the programs and so forth. And
yeah, well, the biggest issue is that revenues are going to be down. Sales tax are going to be significantly down. There may be a reduction in state aids and shared revenues as well, and that's going to impact everything that the county does budget-wise. We've just now begun pulling together the initial asks on the budget from the various departments. We always have a deficit. This time it's quite substantial. And we have a lot of capital improvement project requests as well. So it's going to be another in a string of very tough budget years. The budget calendar has us presenting the initial budget to the county board at the end of July. And thereafter it'll go to committees. CJCC is overseen by the Committee on Administration. So that committee will review that budget along with the others that it oversees in August. And then we'll do the really hard work in September. We've already sat down, the CFO and I have already begun sitting down with department heads on massaging the initial asks that have come through. So we shall see. Of course, as we start, like I say, there's always a deficit. This time it's pretty substantial. So we'll have to see where we fall out.
Okay. All right. Any Chairman Bartlett, anything you'd like to add, or?
No, I think budget-wise, Mr. Miller summed it up pretty well. So.
Okay. And Supervisor Tripp, how about you? Anything from your perspective? You're good to go? Okay. All right. Well, I suppose we should move on. And we're going to look at, time goes fast, I guess, when we go around the horn here. But we have number 6, racial injustice protests. What are we doing right and what do we do better? Sarah, do you want to lead off on that?
Sure. That's something that the CJCC and executive and our data group has been looking at, is really those racial disparities of the folks that are coming in. So we've been tracking that and paying attention to that for some time. In our community, we're pretty homogenous overall. But as far as the rates of folks that do enter the criminal justice system, there is a higher disparity level with African Americans, and it's probably a lower disparity level with Asian Americans compared to what our community makeup is. That being said, we've been paying attention, but we have not really identified the whys or what's going on and the effects. We have kind of dug in to look at a few different months This was last year, just to see kind of what was going on when the rates kind of fluctuated, to see, are these folks that live in our community, are these folks that are traveling on the interstate, are these Stout students, or where's some of this coming from? What we found in that little analysis, our numbers are really low. So sometimes the percentages can be skewed. But there's also that repeat contact was a factor that was identified. But again, it's hard to extrapolate and say we've got these patterns going on because they're very small numbers. So we're mindful of it. We've been tracking it since 2016. The demographics of law enforcement contacts. We also, the jail collects demographics on those that are booked into jail. So we've been monitoring those over time. Chief Atkinson's not with us today, but he's also been pretty progressive as far as that community policing and really, having those conversations with the community. So I think those are things that we're doing right. I think there's always things that we can improve. We do look at our programs, and I think that's something that our data work group can do as well with this recidivism program, is look at who's getting in our programs, because it's not only who law enforcement's having contact with, but their progression through the system. And if we have less people getting into our different diversion programs, that also identifies that we have an issue that needs to be worked on. So, and some of those issues can just be more cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, being more open to recruiting people and encouraging them to take part in the different programs. So there's a lot of different decision points in the criminal justice system that decisions are made, and that they can impact people's participation or even trust in the system. So these are really complicated issues, but we've certainly been keeping our eye on just the makeup of people that are coming into our system.
Well, and if I might just throw something out there, and I just thought through this time where we've had these protests and riots and so forth, that just very thankful that we have a CJCC and that we do collaborate here and that we have shared values, and and for the work that's been done, I think that has made a difference. I mean, we're never going to be perfect. We are always a work in progress. But I think the fact that that we are mindful of those core values, about procedural justice and treating people fairly, treating people with dignity and respect, all of those things. And frankly, my opinion is, if law enforcement all over the country, if they focused on those fundamentals, and they treat everybody with dignity and respect, and they're professional in how they operate, that would take care of much of the problem that we see out there. I mean, you're always going to have I'm totally shocked by what happened in Madison last night. I can't understand how that advances the ball for anybody anywhere, that statutes of some, Hans Christian Heg, a Scandinavian who put together a Scandinavian unit in the Civil War, fought for the Union, died fighting Civil War. How tearing that statue down at the Wisconsin Capitol, how that advances the ball, I just don't get it at all. But I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. I think these are good things that we're doing, and it's important to note that we would not have gotten our third judgeship if not for having a CJCC operating, and for having the treatment courts and making these efforts. So I think we've been on the right path, and hopefully we can continue to, with those efforts. So with that, I just like to throw it out for anybody else. Anybody else want to comment on that particular topic? I don't think anybody wants to venture on that one. So, okay. But again, the idea that, for example, the CIT training, that's, an area where, if we follow that and more officers get that training, and, those are the type of things that you don't always know, you get that immediate feedback when you're doing something right. But you often do when you're doing something wrong. And so hopefully we can sustain those efforts to make sure that, we're doing things you know, that we can be proud of what we're doing. You know, equal justice for all, I think, is important, and you know, upholding the Constitution and so forth. So, okay, well, if nobody else has any comments on that, why don't we jump ahead? And number 7, as you all know, we have a third branch that will begin August 1st, 2021, and so we are going to be faced with some planning in terms of how we're going to change things when that occurs. And we haven't really done much on it yet, but I think that that's something that we would like to include CJCC in terms of, you know, some of the possibilities. Several years ago, there was some talk about, and that's later on an item on the agenda, but there was talk about having an OWI court, which I think would be a good problem-solving court, but we just looked at it at the time and said, well, if we get a third judge, maybe we'll talk about it. So maybe it's time to talk about that. Some of the other things we have to consider is, how are we going to structure our intake? Are we going to do 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off, or 3 weeks on and 6 weeks off, that sort of thing? And we'll be looking at some of the other 3-judge counties to see how things operate. And but it opens up a whole number of possibilities for us, particularly if we have a longer trial. You know, we will potentially have more off intake time to take up those matters. And so I just like to throw that out there. Katie, anything that you see are things that we have to be thinking about with the third judge?
Well, I think there's a lot to think about. I think we should start planning at some point. I think we can maybe have some internal discussions and then bring it forward to the CJCC just to kind of see logistically how it would work. My thought would be 2 weeks of intake, 4 weeks off. I think that might be a little better than 3 weeks of intake, but I think it's also up to the judges to make that decision too. As far as the OWI court, yeah, I think we could definitely handle it once we get a third judge, but until then, I don't think we can take any more on.
Right, Judge Smeltzer, how about you? I know you have a lot of thoughts.
Well, as far as the third judge and Katie and, well, Jim, you and I and Katie, we've all talked about it. But the first thing we got to do, I think, is going forward is just to sit with Andrea, Ms. Nodoff, and we got to look at kind of, the big thing is if you're going to continue with a form of block scheduling, which I believe is the most efficient way to go, but we have to have some input among those that are most directly affected, and then see what kind of a plan can look like to make good use. You want to protect, I guess, the resource that you're bringing in a third judge, and you want to be able to maximize the benefit that the county gets. So you got to be very careful on how you do it. Because I go to a lot of third judge counties and they're scheduling things all over the place, and you don't see where they've gained some of the efficiencies that you should gain from having this additional resource. But I think one of the first things, Andrea, we'll have to, pull you in, and we'll have to start talking and get some rough outlines of kind of where we want to go.
Okay. Well, Andrea, anything you want to add in there?
No, just that I think it's gonna, we just have to make sure we have the sufficient victim witness staff, is that I'm more worried about, given some changes with Marcy's Law when we have multiple branches going on off intake weeks. That's, I guess, my biggest concern. And now that we're fully staffed, I think we're ready, and the third judges will get things moving. I wanted to quick clarify. I had my office manager run the numbers while you were talking, Judge Peterson, and actually our felony and misdemeanor cases are actually up slightly from last year so far, which was surprising to me. It feels like it's been slower, but I think we've just been summoning those individuals in rather than having them appear on our jail list. But our traffic forfeitures are certainly down. But as we said at last meetings, I think we're going to be catching up in the near months, but I think our traffic will certainly be down since officers were not making as many stops.
Okay, and yeah, again, that's the thing, is that I want to make sure that we're committed to being open to discussing and coordinating with the other departments in terms of operations. I think one of the challenges is to try to continue with the third judge to be as cohesive as we've been with 2 judges, in making sure that we are, for example, not requiring the DA's office to be all over the place, that you may have, again, try to, again, work with you to make sure that, like, again, with your victim witness staff, but those are the conversations we'll have to have so that we can take all of those things into consideration. So, okay, anything else on that right now? Because I know we have a bunch more and maybe we're not going to be able to get to everything. I think it's 1 o'clock. We already lost Chris, and I'm sure other people have things to do and places to be. Paul, you got to go as well. So, and what do you think, Sarah, what do you think would be the most important that we just touch base on here, maybe next meeting?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. The work group report was attached, so there hasn't been a whole lot of work group activity. We have resumed data work group because there's some real tangible projects that we're working on. And we are taking a look at OWI data. So we are kind of at least looking at the numbers to see if it would make sense to perhaps have an OWI court down the road. So, that I think on the actions, we could probably just hold off until we meet again. Our next scheduled meeting is at the end of July, unless you wanted to meet before then.
Sounds good to me. Anybody else have any suggestions there? Okay, I'm sure we all have a lot of other meetings between now and then also, and certainly we can have a lot of conversations about those things that we have to address going forward. So anyway, thank you all for attending today and participating in this conversation. And in respect of your time, I think we're going to adjourn the meeting. So we're adjourned, and see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.